From making fast pals to making even faster enemies, the friend spell is disparaged by players far and wide who find its short-term benefit not worth the lingering side effects. Nevertheless, I'll be going over a few good ways to use this enchanting cantrip in your next session, as well as try to unpack some of the headier rules discussions around Friends. But first, the basics. Friends is a cantrip available to bards, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. It causes the caster to have advantage on all charisma checks, which covers deception, performance, persuasion, and intimidation, directed at one non-hostile creature for up to 1 minute. After the spell ends, the creature automatically becomes hostile toward the caster, realizing that it's been influenced by magic. Let's stop here to turn to the Dungeon Master's Guide, which kinda lays out exactly what D&D 5e's definition of hostile is. A hostile creature opposes the adventurers in their goals, but doesn't necessarily attack them on sight. For example, a condescending noble might wish to see a group of upstart adventurers fail, so as to keep them from becoming rivals for the king's attention, thwarting them with slander and scheming rather than direct threats and violence. The adventurers need to succeed on one or more challenging charisma checks to convince a hostile creature to do anything on their behalf. That said, a hostile creature might be so ill-disposed toward the party that no charisma check can improve its attitude, in which case any attempt to sway it through diplomacy fails automatically. TLDR, there are tiers of hostility, and even the most hostile creature may not engage in violence to express their ill disposition. Basically, it's unlikely that a creature's hostility at being duped into conversing more freely than usual will amount to an automatic bout of combat, especially if you're in polite society where aggravated assault is usually more frowned upon than smooth talking and Jedi mind trickery. With that out of the way, let's look at a few ways to use friends effectively. And to be clear, I'm not talking about using your real-life friends. Don't do that. Or the 90s sitcom. We're talking about Friends, the D&D cantrip. The number one best trick for using this spell effectively is to disguise yourself before using it, either with the Disguise Self spell, a disguise kit, or being a changeling. With any of these options, you're free to cast Friends and make someone hostile against whatever person you looked like in disguise. We've got JC's confirmation that the you they blame is whoever they perceive you to be. For charmed person anyway, but I don't see why Friends would be any different. Warlocks who are into smooth talking often enjoy picking up the Mask of Many Faces invocation to allow for endless disguising fun, and consequence-free casting of Friends. Or you can pick up the Eldritch Adept feat if dipping into Warlock isn't your thing. For an even more advanced strategy, you can disguise yourself as one of your enemies, or someone else that you'd like the target to become hostile against for one reason or another. Note that DMs might set a higher bar for passing yourself off as a specific person rather than just looking like not you, especially if the person you're communicating with is familiar with the person whose identity you're impersonating. The actor feat can help for situations like this by allowing you to disguise your voice as well as your appearance. But with these tricks, you can get a great 2-for-1 deal. A leg up in charisma checks for a minute, and creating trouble for your adversary. Which brings me to tip number 2 for Friends, which is to use it on creatures who you're already planning to make into enemies. Some folks are likely to become hostile toward you regardless of what you do. The most obvious example is when you're planning on intimidating someone. Intimidation is a charisma check after all, and so benefits from Friends. There's a good chance that they'll be hostile toward you by the end of the interaction, regardless of whether you use magic to influence them. Or say you plan to use deception to convince someone to act against their best interest. Well, it may have taken them longer to learn that they'd been duped, but there's a good chance that they were going to turn hostile toward you at some point. The simplest scenario of all is when you plan on killing the person you're using Friends on after they tell you what you want to know. I mean, who cares if a dead guy doesn't like you? For a much less nuanced trick with Friends, you can also just run like hell after getting what you want. A few situations come to mind. Like, say you're trying to talk your way into a guarded and crowded place, like a party or something.
I don't need to be on that list, you idiot. You piece of dirt, who are you?
Or if you're on a busy street in a highly populated city, you could use Friends to help negotiate with a vendor and quickly get lost in the crowd afterwards.
Excuse me, sir. How much for this?
Those are 50 cents.
Well, I won't pay full price, so I'll give you a dime.
They're 50 cents, buddy.
Very well, I'll drop you a quarter.
No.
Okay, 35 cents.
I don't have time for this friggin' shit. Give me the 30.
She might not like you the next time you meet, but she probably won't bother leaving her stall to chase you down. This one is inherently risky, and you're basically inviting the DM to serve you your comeuppance at some point, but hey, that's just another adventure to look forward to. In a similar vein, you can also use Friends to more easily infiltrate a guarded location. I'm talking about situations where you're planning on killing those guards or attacking their masters at some point anyway. In such scenarios, there's no love lost by creating post-Friends hostility in the process of gaining entry. Another tip for Friends is to pair it with Speak with Animals. This is a cheaper option than using Animal Friendship, a first level spell that has a chance to fail. I mean, who cares if a squirrel hates your guts, right? This is also great for a neutral or evil forest gnome character who wants to abuse their ability to speak with small beasts. Until you abuse it too much, and the DM is forced to plan an adventure centered around the revenge of the forest critters. Sounds like a great time to me anyway. And now we get to the craziest use of friends of them all, causing any creature in the multiverse to hate you. I was hesitant to include this one because it's absolutely bananas and definitely not what the developers intended when they made this spell, but it is a popular meme, and so I'd be remiss not to share it with you all. Basically, Friends is an oddity in that, like the rules for stabilizing a creature, no range is listed in the spell's description. Well, technically the spell's range is self, which also gets around the general rule of needing a clear path to the target that applies to all spells. You always have a clear path to yourself, after all. But back to the shenanigans. By casting Friends and directing the spell's effects at one creature of your choice that isn't hostile toward you, you can gain the enmity of any creature in any plane of existence, even ones you've never met before. Why would you want to do that? Well, if you pair this trick with the Disguise Self trick, you can now make any powerful creature hostile toward your biggest foe. Disguise yourself as the campaign's BBEG, and then target Tiamat with friends from halfway around the world. That sort of thing. For my 2 cents, I think this is utterly absurd and would shut this down with a firm no as a DM. But like I said, it's a meme worth sharing, and I do admit to a guilty pleasure of rules lawyering for its own sake, and this does seem like an unintended rules as written reading of the spell's description. My final trick is subclass specific, and that's to be an enchantment wizard. This is a pretty big commitment just to get some extra mileage out of a cantrip, but enchantment wizards are able to avoid Friends' major downside with their 14th level feature, Alter Memories. With it, you can make a creature unaware it was enchanted by you, and possibly forget the time it was charmed if it fails an intelligence saving throw. With this, you basically have permanent advantage on charisma checks. Pretty neat, and not game-breaking for a class that won't normally have good charisma to begin with. As a final note, I want to give some advice for DMs out there who struggle to roleplay an NPC's hostility. Here are just a few examples of how hostility can manifest itself without a fight breaking out. The merchant is infuriated that you tricked him into selling his wares for an unfair price. He refuses to do business with you and spreads word among other wealthy townspeople and traders that your party isn't to be trusted. The nobleman resents that you used magic to intimidate him in front of his peers. He'll do his best to make sure the local ruler stops giving you contracts, and find a way to save face by humiliating you in public. An urchin whom you persuaded into sharing info in an underground crime network decides to get her gang together and target you and your party with a relentless series of pickpockets. The guy you were flirting with so successfully all of a sudden becomes repulsed as he feels violated by the magic you've used to affect his perception of you. The bartender whom you've convinced to spot you a free drink asks for his money and refuses to serve you another one until you pay up, at twice the regular rate. The street vendor whom you took advantage of calls the guards to investigate your predatory use of magic on innocent townsfolk. The court wizard whom you tricked into sharing some secret lore works from the shadows to hinder you with minor magical tricks. The centaur whom you convinced to share the secrets of the forest departs in a huff. He refuses to share any more knowledge with you or your party. Hopefully these examples are helpful for figuring out what the post-Friends reaction is like in your specific scenario. And don't forget, the DMG says that a few challenging charisma checks might be able to win over a hostile creature. So remind players that all is not lost if a creature isn't 100% hellbent on retribution. If your players are too scared to pick up Friends because of the guaranteed hostility, you can also tweak it with a simple house rule that's endorsed by D&D adventure designer Will Doyle. His idea is to simply make it so that Friends only triggers hostility once you fail a charisma check. By making Friends work this way, players have to make a calculated risk each time they try to push their luck with another charisma check. Will this be the one that makes the target finally catch on and become hostile? And if players are happy to just get one advantage charisma check and move on scot-free, this tweak also allows for that. Anyway, do you guys have any other fun uses for the Friends cantrip? Questions about its rules? Ideas for house rules to improve its functionality? Let me know in the comments. This is D&D Lounge wishing you the best of luck in your next spellcasting venture.